Ok? Boa noite a todos. Eu sou o Felipe Lotti, ex-diretor de negócios em 2017. Hoje eu sou analista no Banco Safra, em São Paulo. É meu prazer e minha honra ser o mediador desse evento. É particularmente um tema que eu gosto muito, já há algum tempo. E antes de começar, tenho alguns avisos para fazer. Primeiro, só os avisos vão ser em português, o evento vai ser em inglês, mas a gente vai disponibilizar logo em seguida tradução ou pelo menos legenda de tudo que a gente está produzindo aqui hoje. Um outro aviso para os alunos da UFSCar é que a gente conseguiu fazer com que o evento conte horas complementares para quem precisar. Então, pode entrar em contato com a Liga pelo canal que vocês preferirem, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, e a gente vai dar um jeito para vocês. Eles, no caso, eu já saí. Então, without further ado, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our guest tonight. First of all, Teresa Barger, which is CEO and founder of Carica Group, based in Washington, D.C. Also, we have tonight Marta Pinheiro, the ESG Business Development Director at XP Investimentos. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Felipe.
So, first of all, we'd like to start tonight with a little overview of your academic and career background. Could you please tell us a little bit more about what you did in college, what you studied so far, some tips for the students, since our audience is mainly composed by undergrad students. What should we study? What should we look for if we are looking for an ESG career?
Do you want to call on us? Which one should go first, Felipe?
So you may go first, Teresa, please.
Okay. Well, I think for me, it's relevant that I grew up in a very poor country. That country is now very rich, and that was Saudi Arabia. But when I grew up, it was extremely poor. There were people with diseases on the streets, a lot of people begging. It was a very poor country, but I could see that it was getting richer because there was a company, in this case, an oil company, which is very anti-ESG these days, but we didn't know that. But it was a company that produced something people wanted to buy. And because of that, people got trained, they got jobs, they could educate their children, they could feed their children, house their children, and you could see in front of your eyes. When I was 10 years old, I was walking behind my house thinking that this is really remarkable, that you can get a whole country better off through companies. And I think having that, maybe that's an overused word, of passion about something was very important and started early. In college, I really just did straight liberal arts. I did some economics and some social sciences. I had to have some science requirements, but I basically was a liberal arts degree. And I actually now hire people who have a liberal arts undergraduate, because I then went to graduate school for business school to learn all those wonderful things about how the world works that I didn't know until my graduate school. And I think that was very important. After business school, I went to McKinsey, which is a consulting firm, and it was like a postgraduate education in business. How does a company work? What are the elements that make a company work well or not work well? What are the elements of strategy, of culture, of competitive position? And also it gave you a really good framework in how to think about business problems. But from there, I got married and I had to move to Washington, D.C., and McKinsey did not have any offices there. And so I looked around and I found a group called International Finance Corporation, and everyone there believed what I believed. They believed that countries could become less poor by companies providing goods and services people wanted to buy. And sustainable companies, so financially sustainable, and then as we got in the 1990s, we started using sustainability to mean what we call ESG today. So we started very early in 1990s. And I was the head of private equity at IFC, and then I was the head of corporate governance. And in the 2000s, we had 2 or 3 sectors that were high performing and one theme, and that theme was corporate governance. If you took a company with bad corporate governance and you turned that around and sold, you could sell it at a much higher price. Those deals had enormous returns. And so it was from then that I got the idea of starting Cartica. We don't take the risks that we took at IFC, but we are still an ESG improvement. And we can talk about how the world moved from governance to environment and social. But that was basically my path until I founded Cartica in 2008. And then Cartica is an ESG improvement fund that invests only in emerging markets, long only, and I'm afraid I have people working on my group.
Remarkable experience. Thank you. So Marta, please.
Yes, no, very good path. So I did start studying public business, public administration. And I would say that during my course, it's when I really fall in love with the third sector, also with the idea to make Brazil different and to understand that I could have an active role on that. So on the beginning, I had an idea to start working or doing something on the first sector, so in the public sector. I tried some stuff, then I decided, okay, I would go for the third sector, which I think I can apply some of the knowledge that I got on the undergraduate course. And I started on Instituto para Desenvolvimento de Investimento Social. It's an institute for the social investment development. So there, I would say that I got the chance to really see what we could do, and that I completely understood that my path in somehow would end up doing something really remarkable or really relevant for us to make a positive impact in any way. So I understood that I could do it myself. I could do it through the company that I was engaged, or in my micro atmosphere, the people that I was engaged with. But on that specific time, I realized that for me to really do something bigger or to make a difference on the third sector, it was a moment on the overall view that the third sector were getting professionalized and getting more and more tools, management tools, and people from the third sector were coming from the private sector, try to apply some methodology, etc. So I decided that I would go for the private sector to really learn how to manage a company, and I made the same step as Teresa. So I went for a consulting. I started working on a Brazilian consulting group focused on management and strategies. It's called Integration Consulting. And I really choose being there because they were they care a lot on the people side of the development of their professionals and the job they are doing. So I thought that it would be a very good path for me to really embrace that methodology, the ways of working, and maybe I could apply that afterwards. But then when I started working, I got myself there almost 9 years. So I was really pleased to work as a consultant. I liked the job and etc. But I didn't see myself really going forward on that career. So it was more a balance. When you grow up, it's a balance of more sales, trade-off in terms of delivering projects, and I like it a lot, the piece of deliver projects. So I decided that I should try something else, and I really believe that for me to deliver a better consulting advisory, I should be on the opposite side, so on the buyer side of consultancy, to really understand how it's going to be on a person that really take risks or make the direct results, to really the consult or advise the companies that if I want to go back. And I came up with the proposal of XP. I've never tried, or I was never involved directly in the investment sector. I did some specific jobs on private equity and other things, but never really focused on investments or financial sector. And here I really saw an opportunity to do something amazing. So now I think we have an opportunity in Brazil to really make ESG something big, something a priority, something that we put on the mainstream. And here in XP, I had the opportunity to start that journey, and I believe I can also make some impact through the private sector and through XP. So that's my curriculum.
Perfect. Thank you, Marta. So moving on for the next session, we now talk about ESG per se. Following this path, I would like to ask you, Marta, why do you believe ESG only fully arrived in Brazil basically this very year? And why should we follow this path as well?
Great. I really believe that the pandemic brought this topic a highlight, really made some light on that. And I believe that's a big part of the answer. But I also do believe that we had that already in other names, I would say. So when I was a student, we saw it as sustainability or corporate governance. And now I think it's pretty cleared, when you talk about finance or investment, you have these three words, environmental, social, and governance, that try to summarize what is the topic behind it, and really to bring the financial sector to that into consideration. So saying that we can really guide and really push this subject when we talk about investment. So if we really, if we're concerned about what our money is really financing, or where it's going through, what are we doing with our money in terms of investments, we could drive a lot of changes, and we could drive a lot of impact. So I would say that's why I would say that it's a hot topic right now. We see that we can change things through investments, and that's something that is really pushing us here in Brazil. Also, we have, when I talk about companies, and I can talk here about XP experience itself, we have pressure, of course, when we talk with our investors, when they are abroad. And this subject is much developed in Europe, also more developed in US, in Japan. So I think this is a pressure really coming. And there's another factor that I think it's really important when we are talking about different generations coming through and really getting access to the money that's coming from the older generations. Millennials and Z generation, they are more careful in terms of what they are role and what they are really impacting the world, the society itself. So they are more worried about companies and more worried about the places they are going to work. So they are so in terms of consumption in products or services, they really look for when that are careful in terms of their impact and what they are doing for environmental and for in social aspects with their employees and etc. So that's why I think it's not only a trend; it's already something happened, and I think it's really the future. I like to think about this aspect and this subject as something that is going to be incorporated in investments and financial aspects. It's not something that I would like to talk in the future ESG as something on addition or another layer, but it's something already embedded in the way we look through investments and the way we look through companies and the way they act. I think we have many data and information already, as Teresa said. For example, if you look in terms of governance, there's a reason why this type of companies or a group of companies that have higher levels of governance, they perform. They have a better performance, they a higher level. The same as diversity and inclusion, for example, which is something really important, that when you see that you have diversion in a company, it's also proven that they perform better. So I think that's a lot of data and a lot of information that is really allowing us to follow that track.
Great. Let's hope it becomes mainstream as soon as possible. So now, Teresa, you are the foreigner here. Looking from outside, you have the big picture. How do you see, particularly as an activist investor, as you define yourself at Cardica, how do you see the climate issues in Brazil from the past years, from now, and how do you foresee the future?
Thank you, Felipe. I might have to correct you a little bit. We don't see ourselves as activists, but we see us as working actively with the companies to make them more valuable. So specifically, you asked me about climate, and I think you asked me it at a perfect time, because the big climate issue for Brazil is the Amazon forests. And the burning of the forests. And August was okay, and September is looking bad. And you know, a couple of years ago, we were working with a company, and we were asking them to sign with us to be members of the forestry sustainability group within Brazil, and their customers had signed it, but they didn't want to sign it. And then they gave us a presentation that came from the Chamber of Commerce that said, oh, these fires happen because someone throws a cigarette out the window. It is not true. They do not happen because someone throws a finger. And when someone tells me that, and I am reading the scientific data that's coming out of the French researchers and German researchers and British researchers, I'm like, you can't say that to me because it's not true. But right now, what we're seeing is these forest fires are raising the cost of capital for Brazil. It's going to hit them in the pocketbook. The credit rating of Brazil will go down. Their credit will cost more. The CDS swaps, do you know what CDS swaps are? The credit default spreads will go up. So what we're seeing is this very big issue for Brazil, which is really the Amazon fires, is going to cost the country. It's going to be expensive to the country. Now, how are all the voters going to understand that it's going to make it more expensive for the country? I don't know. But certainly, I think business leaders are going to be understanding that. And also, foreign direct investment is directly tied to it. I can't tell you as a foreigner, when I tell people I invest in Brazil, the first question they ask me is, isn't that terrible because they're so bad about the climate? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, their forests are one of the biggest carbon sinks in the world. They help the climate, but all they're talking about is those forest fires. That's the headline news. Is all anyone wants to know. There are plenty of Brazilian companies that are doing a wonderful job on the environment, and we're invested in some of them, and they're coming up with new, for example, how to use wood, non-Amazon wood that's grown in the south of the country, to replace plastics. Fabulous stuff. So there's so much good going on, but the headline on the forest fires, I would just say, first of all, be honest about it. Don't lie about it. This is not people throwing cigarettes out their car. And two, understand that it's going to be expensive for the country. And I think this is why we might see 2020 as a turning point on this specific issue of climate. Not just the other two are separate.
Let's hope our fellow Brazilians understand this issue and vote with that in mind. So our next question, back to Marta. As a business developer, what challenges do a company faces through this transformation process, being a regular profit-based company to an ESG also? Because we learn through ESG, but you don't have to we can do both, doing good and make money. What challenges this transformation gives a company?
Perfect. That's very good question. And just to add on Teresa's answer, I think you want to mention the engineered wood, the one they're doing on the south of Brazil. It's a really fantastic, amazing project. I think the difference here is really to take into consideration different stakeholders. It's when you say it's a capitalism of stakeholders, and not only of the shareholders. So you're not worried with the ones that really have the shares of the company, but also the whole environment itself. So people who is living on that place, the environmental. So the deeper you consider that aspect, I would say the better you're going to really integrate that in your business and take that into consideration. So first for me is this, try to adjust this view. So not only to consider your shareholders, but put into perspective a more broader view in terms of stakeholders. Then I do believe that for companies to integrate ESG, they should consider that in their culture. So it's something, it's a transformation. It's not something that you put in a specific area or a group of people or a person in charge of that topic that is going to make a difference or that's going to make this transformation to happen. And through that, I think it's a journey. It's not something simple. It's something, on the other hand, it's complex and there's a lot of layers for you to integrate that, and it takes time for you to go deeper and really absorb that on your process in the way that you make decisions, that you incorporate through people in the culture. And so it's really something strategical. You have to align that with your strategy. It's a long-term view that you should take into consideration this aspect when you are making decisions, when you are really choosing a way to go. And making some tough decisions. It's not only good things here. It's not only for you to go and announce something nice or do something that it's considered something good, a specific activity or specific action. You're going to have tough questions to decide, such as the ones that Teresa mentioned. For example, for us, that we are now we have a bank license, for example, we do credit. So we have to define our policy, for example, for credit lending. So are we going to decide to accept any type of company, any type of sector, or how do we look ESG as this perspective, or on the other hand, in terms of products that we put in our platform, or on our asset management side, that we do also have our own asset management here. What are going to be the decisions for an investment? How are we going to consider that? It's not only, I would say, easy alternatives or easy decisions to make. Sometimes you are going to define, for example, of not investing or not giving a credit. It's something difficult in terms of relationship, in terms of for you to give an explanation, in terms for you to positioning the whole marketing. So you really have to have a position. So here, through our path, we are building our positioning in terms of which causes we are aligned, how ESG is really inside of our culture. You know, we are really transforming that, how we see that align with our brand, with our solutions, with our products, with the way we communicate with clients, the way we communicate with our ecosystem. So I would say that you really have to walk the talk and consider that since the strategy through the process of the decisions that you do on your day-by-day activities. I think this is the challenge.
Okay, thank you. And so do you think can you build this strategy bottom up, or it must be something top down?
I think it's really important for you to have an alignment in terms of top management or top direction. And when you talk about a company, because the C-level or the very first level of executives, they have to be aligned with that. And they have to really sustain the position and really have that in mind, that they are going to make decisions, take into consideration that aspects, and the way they decide it's going to change, or it's going to also consider a different perspective. But you also can transform, and I think that's essential, it's crucial, that you have employees aligned with that, and also make that on a day-by-day on their activities. They are also engaged with activities that the company is doing, or they also can do their part in the process, and they can participate to implement this culture and the whole process itself. So I would say that it's really essential to have the top level alignment, but it's important to be through the whole company and the bottom level of the company also to engage and to participate on the process.
Okay, thank you. Now, Teresa, let's talk about Latin America as well. We're not only talking about Brazil tonight. We know that Cardiga is especially good at stock picking, but you also look for the political economic environment as well. What do you look in the macroeconomic sector of a country before deciding to go in?
Felipe, would you allow me just to add 2 sentences to what Marta said? Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. When we look at individual companies, we look at ESGC. So we look at ESG, but we also look at the corporate culture of the company. And I have read all of the academic articles that talk about the relationship between financial performance and corporate culture. And there's not a lot of academic reports, that's why I could read them all. But what they do say is that when you have a positive culture, and that's a sort of a different seminar, we could go into what that is, you do get a higher returns, financial returns. And I think that Marta made a very important point, is that ESG has to be part of the corporate culture. It is the cheapest way to enforce anything you want in your company. If you want that behavior, the cheapest way to enforce it is to have it a belief of everybody in the company. So I just wanted to add that we refer to ESGC. On your macro question, Felipe, to answer, it's really is very country specific. So in Brazil right now, I would say the very big things that we are looking for that are on the political economy are, first of all, the fiscal deficit, both short term and long term. We know that you have to suffer on the deficit in the short term because of COVID, but we want to make sure that the long term safeguards to get that deficit down are there. The other thing is quite obviously the reforms. And I really think that your president, Temer, for all of the issues he had in campaign finance, was an amazing reformer and maybe the most amazing reformer of any country in the 21st century. And those reforms need to continue. And we're quite pleased to see that the Congress is actually continuing reforms. We'd like to see more. We'd like to see it go on. And like a lot of countries, they're also addressing bankruptcy reform. That's huge for almost all of our countries we're in. And then the third thing is you had this cleansing recession in 2014 to 2016, but you never really came out of it. But it did the right things. It did what it was supposed to do in terms of business cycles and recessions. But then, and a lot of companies got a lot better. We saw companies starting to use artificial intelligence, using virtual reality for a maintenance guru to help fix something that was 1,000 kilometers away. All sorts of interesting things, a lot of big data, a lot more emphasis on understanding what the customers were. So many things on the company side. But you still haven't recovered from the recession. So we think that you could have a very nice recovery going into 2021. So that's, for example, what we're looking for in Brazil. Mexico's very different situation because they don't have a big deficit problem. They have a big problem with the currency because it's very, very liquid. And they also have they almost have opposite problem. They have a president that is a real fiscal hawk, doesn't want to spend any money, but is also not doing the right things to overcome COVID, to deal with the public health issues, and to give the economy a boost, particularly when the global economy is recovering through manufacturing and export. And that's what they do. And the government has done nothing to support them in that. So Mexico, we would look at something very different. And Chile, again, something very different there, obviously very copper oriented. We do think commodities will do better. And then they have a lot of issues on their own pension reform for a completely different set of reasons. And so there are going to be different things that we're going to look for there. But these EM countries, the 26 countries of the emerging markets, they're like old friends to us. So we know we have history with all of them, and we also try to keep up on what's new as well, so that it's going to vary country by country.
Excellent. Thank you for your global overview. And since the timing is still all right, we can have another question before moving for our Q&A. And I believe Marta gave us a glimpse of this topic about a kind of myth about underperformance through ESG, supposed additional costs and shrinking markets. Do you too, the question is for both of you, do you believe that this is a myth of underperformance? It's just a myth? Can we debunk with data, or what do you think about it?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you may start, since you gave us a start on the topic. Please, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Well, what I could share, just as a compliment on the other question, you asked about the opportunity, and I think that's really linked with this other question here. I think in our case here in Brazil, we have a huge opportunity, not only to really link our investments through a purpose or with what we would like to see as a change, or how we would like to impact our environment and our society, etc. So as a belief, a personal belief, or how we would like to make a difference in terms of personal difference, but also as again, as Teresa started mentioning, as you see that companies that have higher governance, and we are talking about they mitigate risk. When you're talking about here ESG, we talk about risk and return, that relationship, and I can talk about that a little bit more later. But here, as we do not have this market really developed, we have an opportunity in terms of investment. So if we really price the companies that are doing well and that are taking care of all those aspects, probably that ones are going to be good performance, and they're going to be good bets. So I would say that here, as the market, it's really being it's getting really not a maturity level. We do have many steps to go through, so we can take advantage of that. So I think it's really something interesting when we look as investment position. But in terms of that myth, I would say that we are lacking information and lacking content to really support, and here I'm talking about an investment perspective, to really support people or companies to for them to understand first of all, what is ESG, what really is ESG. So we do have some confusion in terms of impact investing, philanthropy, and some confusion. So I think it's something really important for us when I put us, is because we do believe as XP, we have a very important role here in supporting with content and education about that for our clients and investors. So I think there's something important for us to provide, and also to clarify first for them to have the trust, and for people really understand and identify and support them on their path of investment, to choose best alternatives, to identify whether a company is really graded or is really well recognized at ESG, the ones that are maybe greenwashing, etc. So I think we do have a lot of space here for that. We run last month, we ran an internal survey with 30,000 clients from XP, and we thought that more than 80% of them, they are interested in ESG, but they do lack some information. They do lack information about what is ESG, how to recognize, how to understand, how to guarantee that they really invest on something that they see the impact of their money going through that specific action, or what the company says, or how they can identify through KPIs or through analysis that that company is really doing something that they are saying, right? So here I think we do have a lot of space, and even in the academic side. So yesterday I was with FGV talking about they are really opening investing group to run some surveys, and one of them is really try to clarify if we do have this trade-off or not with data. So I think that's an amazing initiative. We have lots of studies done on United States, I think in Europe, because they are ahead in terms of products, so they have a large population of data for them to analyze. Here we do not have many products for a long period for us to analyze, but we can analyze companies themselves, for example. But I think we have a lot of space here to try to clarify this type of myth or consideration.
Okay, we are still in the baby steps of ESG in Brazil. And Teresa, you are in a more developed market for ESG. Do you think this is at least more than Brazil? Do you think there is an outperforming of ESG?
Well, what we have seen recently is that the data shows that funds that follow ESG principles do better than funds that don't. There's some noise in that, but there is data that says yes. Now everyone's just branding their fund ESG, whether or not it's authentic or not. So yeah, there is that problem. But I don't want to say that there's no cost to a company to put in new policies and procedures to do environmental, social, and governance right. Because there is a cost, and there is the issue of how can you do that, get where you get the biggest bang for the lowest cost. We are an ESG improvement fund. So we go into companies and we talk to them about how can you become more valuable as a company. And if it costs them too much to do something for very little gain, we're not going to suggest that. We're going to suggest the very big things that they can do. On the governance side, often that's capital allocation. So the single biggest thing you can do in governance. And in other cases, getting on the Nova Mercado is the number one thing. So I don't want to pretend, Felipe, that there is no cost. But yes, in general, companies that pay attention to the ESG pay more attention to everything. And they just pay more attention. And so that is why, over a long period of time, we have seen companies that do better in ESG do better in general, because they are managing their company much more closely.
Very good. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Marta, and thank you, Teresa. So now we are moving to our third session, Q&A. Questions from our audience. And here I have a question from João. He asks, Teresa, emerging economies tend to have different risks in comparison to developed ones. What's your approach on mitigating political risks in emerging markets?
Obviously, we do think about what's going on overall politically. And if a country is in a very messy situation, we might avoid that country if it's super messy. But really what it is, usually our issue is regulatory. So if we go into a company, we're going to look at we look at the Porter model plus two other things, and one of the things we want to know, what are the relationships with customers, suppliers, etc. But what is the regulatory risk? And the regulatory risk is very high in our countries because the regulatory regimes are changing, and when they're changing, then you can get in a lot of trouble. And so we, for example, will never go into a company that accepts subsidies, because if the government's going to give you a subsidy, they can take it away. So that's one of the very, very old lessons that we've learned, 30 years ago. But I would say that identifying every regulatory risk in a company and then trying to understand where they are on those risks is very important. And then a companion to that is that we also try to understand the integrity of every owner manager that's running the companies that we invest in, because if we invest with high integrity people, they generally are more insulated. One case would be the Tata company in India is very well known for we will never pay a bribe. So no one ever asks them to pay a bribe, and they fetch a premium, the stock premium, because of that.
Interesting, thank you. And now, Marta, someone who's not identified wants to know more about your particular area at XP or XP, as you mentioned. What does the ESG business development group does? I believe you're not a portfolio manager.
No, I'm not. Actually, these are two different areas. So one is ESG and the other one is business development. And on business development, I will start with this one because some people really think about business development or something related to sales. But here in XP is really something related to XP development. So it's more internal in terms of innovation, in terms of process, in terms of how we really have the whole management system take into consideration when we are talking about XP management itself. So the process, the governance, and how do we really run XP. So it's this part of business development. So we do innovation projects, for example, as the ones that we launched. I forgot the name. Nevertheless, we launched the administradora, then the aseguradora, and different. We also did the integration of both acquisitions we've done in the past, Clear and Rico, that are those two brands of ours nowadays. So we have different types of business that we really innovate in terms of building a new thing, building a new service, a product, or a business itself. So we really take things from the paper and make them reality. And the other one is ESG itself. It's really, I have two main pillars in ESG. One is more internal in terms of how do we XP our reference in terms of ESG practices. How do we really incorporate ESG in our governance process and decision-making process itself. And the other one, it's more external related pillar, which is how do we push our ecosystems in terms of ESG with the relationship that we have with clients, with AFIs, also with the insurers of each of our products and services. So how can we really to make that topic something around us in different perspectives?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, if it's not clear, the person that make the questions can reach me directly and I can explain, no problem.
Okay, thank you for your opening. And now looking for the other side of the table, Teresa, you are kind of portfolio manager, and how do you explained this in the last question I asked you, but Mateus is asking, how does a portfolio manager balance profitability with ESG aspects in stock picking? I believe you're muted.
Sorry.
It happens with everyone.
It does. It's a hazard of our time. So actually for us, what we will look for companies that we think could be more valuable if they change something. So for example, we might look for companies that have too much cash and they are earning, one of our companies earning 35% ROE, but they had half their balance sheet in cash. So we actually went after this company specifically for that reason. And we said to them, your capital allocation is terrible. Your business earns 35, your your cash earns 1%. This is a country that earns 1%. And if you took all the cash you need for all the capex for the next 10 years, and you have the opex that you need, and just put that aside, and the rest you use to reduce capital, your ROE could be 55%. So we have to lay that out in an argument to the company. We gave them, a PowerPoint with all of our spreadsheets and everything, gave it to them. And then they said, we're going to give this to Deloitte. We said, yes, do that. Give it to Deloitte. And then take it to your board and don't tell us what you're going to do because we don't want non-public information. But we highly recommend that you become the most shareholder-friendly company in your country, which you would do by moving to a 55% ROE. And God bless them, they did it. The regulators made them do it over 3 years, but they now have a habit of doing that. So we look for how we can make a company more valuable. And that can happen on the governance side very easily. Obviously, getting a company onto Novo Mercado makes it more valuable in the Brazil context. Water scarcity. I mean, companies in Mexico, in a year or two, any company that is not dealing with water scarcity in Mexico is going to lose their customers and their regulators. It's life and death. But another company that I talked to their main customer. I talked to the head of ESG for their main customer, and he said all of our suppliers need to be net carbon neutral in 10 years. So I went to the company and I said, you need to be net carbon neutral now. You need to be first on the list. You don't want to be the supplier that's cut off. And they go, how do we do that? I go, we can help you. That's what we do. We want to help you become net carbon neutral. So we are looking for companies that actually can become more valuable by addressing these issues.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. Now, Marta, Amanda is asking you if we can correlate the concept of circular economy with ESG. Do you believe that? And she asks as well, could you please comment in which aspects those companies correlate and which they don't?
Okay, yeah, I think there in some aspects when we talk about, as I said, a broader view of stakeholders, and when we think about the whole and how we consider that, so I would say that has something to deal with ESG as a concept. So I would say just examples, how you engage with your providers, and how can you also influence that topic, or also how you push that perspectives with the ones that you are dealing in your day-by-day business. So in that aspect, I would say that that's something that we can see as a similar way of treating that, and there are different aspects. So investments, for example, when we start asking about ESG aspects for the ones that for issuers or for the companies that we are evaluating in our research areas, I think you create that knowledge, or you create that sense of really mobilizing people towards that topic. So I think with simple activities like this one, really including some ESG questions when we are relating, you have a relationship with your provider, how do you also provide transparency and visibility for customers or clients, how do you discuss these questions internally, how you apply that information when you are evaluating a company for a debit issuer, for example, or in terms of a company when you are making an analysis, a report. So I think that that's something we could do, or we try to instigate the topic and make it present in different perspectives of the things that we do on the daily basis.
Great, thank you again. So the next question is for Teresa, but before that, I must say that unfortunately we are going short on time. So if you both are available in your agenda, we may go on. So before asking the question, I would like to know from you if we can go on with our questions or we must unfortunately cut. Please, Teresa.
Well, we could go for a few minutes, but I always think it's better to leave people wanting more rather than to get them bored.
Absolutely.
Short is sweet.
Okay, thank you. So the question is from Pedro. Teresa, could we say that companies that are both tech and ESG, like Microsoft or Apple, have a tendency of growing during the next months, during 2020 and the years to come? Or whatever factors do you believe that makes easier for a company to become an ESG company?
Okay, so they're kind of two different questions. For many years, the technology companies got off easy because they didn't pollute, and so they were seen as greener companies because I just hire a bunch of programmers that sit in their house and program, and so we don't have a carbon footprint. Then came addiction to games, addiction to screens, and then came issues of monopoly. And then came issues of Facebook groups manipulating elections and so it became much more complicated, and it wasn't just about we get a good grade because we don't have a high carbon footprint, and so I think that we are now into more sophisticated issues of ESG. I do believe that the new economy increasingly is the economy. Every company needs a digital strategy. And it's very rare for us to invest in a company that does not have a digital strategy. We have about 55% of our portfolio that is technically in the new economy, but almost all of the other companies at least are savvy about where that's going. So I think that the narrow performance that we've seen in the US and in China, where it's only the top 10 names, which are mostly tech, do well, that could change. That was the major investment thesis of the 2010s. The major investment thesis of any one decade is never the major investment thesis of the next decade. So my view is that probably we will, in the 2020s, find that other companies will catch up. We won't necessarily just have the US S&P 500 index fund, but we'll see more active management. We'll see some of the lesser known companies do better. Some of the smaller companies do better. We ourselves are only in mid-cap companies. So our new economy companies are from countries that don't have enough venture capital to keep them public until they're worth 10 and 20 and 40 billion dollars. So they actually go to the markets because they need to. And so that's actually been very positive for us. So the question is a little complicated, but I'll just leave it there. Two sides of it, tech and ESG for tech, which is getting complicated now.
Okay, thank you very much. And therefore, we will now close our event. In behalf of the Financial Market League and the whole academic community, not just want to thank you both very much for your presence, for your time, and for your answers. Thank you, guys. And let me switch for Portuguese just a minute. Obrigado a todos. E qualquer dúvida, qualquer outra informação, podem pedir pelo canal, qualquer canal da Liga que vocês queiram. Thank you, everyone. Good night, and see you soon.
Obrigada.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Marta. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Teresa. Obrigada.